Hi there, I'm Matthew Lester from the Rhodes Business School. We've learned a lot at university, but perhaps not that much about our personal finances. In this series of lectures, we're going to be looking at what graduates should be doing after leaving university to keep themselves financially secure. How should you be investing your money? What insurances do you need? How do you avoid the debt trap? And a whole lot of other mistakes that graduates have made over the years when they've left university. In this first lecture, we will look at the need for financial planning in South Africa today.
In Generation Jones, we find they didn't have much to spend their money on. Food, education, bus and train fares, and generally keeping up with the Joneses. Then we got to the next generation, or the baby boomers, and we found that they had to add in consumerism, the cost of buying your first washing machine, car and house. In Generation X, we saw added to the list of items in the family budget, not the cost of haircuts, but rather housing and the first emergence of an oil crisis. But they carried on. Things began to change in Generation Y. They had the same costs as previous generations, but added to this was the cost of acquiring and maintaining technology. The oil crisis seemed to disappear for a while. Then life changed. The change came from Alan Greenspan and Bill Clinton. They looked at America and said, stuff the cost of building houses for people, let people rather borrow and build their own houses. This changed life as we know it, because we went from the TV soap operas of the 70s, one guy and his wife sitting at home, to the far more complicated family of today with a far bigger spend. Governments have looked at this and said, how do we provide these families with a medical scheme, unemployment benefits, other social security benefits, a retirement package, and all that, and they've said, stuff it, let's look elsewhere. Can't we get somebody else to do the work for us? And they have found the solution in the East, where labor costs are a lot lower. So in Generation Z, or the millennials, we are looking at a new set of problems. They've got the usual spends, but now we've got the additional costs of wine factor and the mall. Children spending a lot more money added to their parents' spend. Then there's the cost of technology, upgrading technology, and now the additional costs of cell phones and data contracts. Also, the properties acquired over the past 10 years have to be maintained and serviced, and that's also straining family budgets. This has caused oil prices to go through the roof, from about $20 a barrel 10 years ago to above $110 today, or in rand terms, from 150 rand a barrel to nearly 1,000 rand a barrel. At the same time, interest rates have declined as governments have struggled to keep the whole thing going. This has placed an enormous burden on pensioners who require interest receipts to keep their pensions going. So today we have the emergence of a new energy crisis, where the total cost of all energies is exceeding the consumer price index. So we take a look at all of those personalities and we say things are changing. Perhaps we should announce a new generation in 2010. And we're going to call them Generation Bieber.
That's great, you might say. A whole generation of techno junkies hanging out at the mall and spending lots of time on the internet. Well, maybe not. For some, it's going to mean that they're going to have to live with their parents for the rest of their lives, and for others, their parents are going to live with them. Just watch this.
The biggest difference is in life expectancy. In Generation Jones, life expectancy was 55 to 60. A Bieber born today will live to more than 100. This creates an enormous strain on family budgets. Because when parents look at it, they say, well, we have paid for the next generation, and we've done that for generations. But today in the Bieber generation, we've got it, the parents are saying, well, we're not dead yet, we're going to live for a long time. And there's not that extra money to spend on the generation before us. We have to look after ourselves. And grannies are looking at it and saying, well, we used to fund the generations below us, i.e. our grandchildren, and we've done that for a long time, but we also have to cut back as we could well live to 100 years old. So the Bieber generation is looking at the same challenges as the Z generation or the millennials, but added to this are going to be the enormous costs of energy, retirement and early retirement, and their costs of their own private health care. When we look at financial planning, we've always looked at it in 4 phases of a suspension bridge. 0 to 23, get educated, get started, 23 to 35, then accumulate wealth from 35 to 65, and retire at 65. But today that is changing, because the parents are sitting in the getting started phase, and they are surrounded by the baby boomer who are currently retiring with insufficient money to live on, and their children who are still dependent on them. So they've become the meat in the sandwich. This creates the domino family effect. The breadwinner and spouse and 3 children is the way we used to look at it. But now in one family we are also getting 4 grandparents sitting up the top, all dependent on a breadwinner in the middle. So when it comes to financial planning, what we are finding is it stays the same in the first block, 0 to 23, getting educated. But the second block endures for nearly 30 years, as people try to support themselves, their children, and their parents. And by the time they get to the accumulation phase, they are already over the age of 50. And there is not enough time left to create a pension to retire on. This can create all sorts of family spins, as if finances go out of the window, we see the whole family starting to be affected, and before we know what's happening, everybody is knocking each other over. Added to this problem are the enormous number of people living in South Africa today. There are 50 million of us. 1.4 million of them are disabled. Then come 2 million AIDS orphans. Then 10 million children on child grants, and 8 million children who look to their parents for support. Then there are 2 million destitute old age pensioners. That's half of South Africa dependent on somebody else. But more recently we have seen the emergence of a new group of people who need to be supported, 4 million who are unemployed, and a staggering 10 million who are not even looking for work. 75% of South Africa is dependent on somebody else. There are 13 million people who do have employment, but 9 million of them are below the tax threshold of 5,000 rands per month, and this leaves a small working class of about 4 million people, most of them sitting in the middle working class. And we have to ask the question, well, how many fat cats are there? Well, there are only about 150,000 South Africans who earn more than 500,000 per year. The problem with a graduate is that they are aspiring to become workers and sit in the last 2 blocks. The requirement of them will be to pay a lot of income tax.
So what's the moral to the story so far? Well, it's quite simply this. We got educated so that we could support ourselves. But if there is one disaster in a South African family today, you could land up dependent on somebody else, and that's not going to be particularly pleasant. Join me in the rest of this series to have a look at the various factors affecting financial planning today and the need for graduates to take it very seriously.
This training intervention is brought to you by the Sanlam Foundation.